Hello, everyone. Joshua Gilliland here, one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. With me is Thomas Harper. And I have a feeling we're just going to sound like two nerds in love with Boba Fett tonight. Tom, how you doing?
You're in love with Boba Fett. I'm mourning over the loss of Banthas. So please don't presume where my heart lies after this episode. I have to say before we get, it's good that we're doing this Sunday night, and for listeners that do the audio podcast, maybe Monday morning or Monday afternoon, evening for your commute, because at this point we're over the hump to getting to the next episode. So this is a really ideal time to do this, because we finish or we talk, and mentally I'm like, man, we've got a whole week, but no, we only have a couple more days and a wake up. So each week it's sort of like marching toward Christmas Eve in a way, except instead of Santa Claus and presents, it's new Star Wars.
Absolutely. I love being in this world where we're getting Star Wars on a weekly basis, as opposed to waiting for years or thinking it was over and then only getting books and then the prequels.
Yeah.
And so like where we are right now, it's like, this is good. Like the variety, the storytelling. And this episode where there was way too much bantha violence.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I have words.
I was really upset. But there are a lot of good things that happened in this.
Yeah, and I'm saving my outrage, my bantha outrage, until the appropriate point. But rest assured, it is locked and loaded.
Oh boy, howdy! So we begin with the assassin who's a member of the Night Wind being drug in by Fennec. They're going to do an interrogation, and there's so many things wrong with crime lords interrogating people, because nothing that we're doing here is legal. Like there's no color of authority. It is just pure law of the gun at this point. And Boba seems to be trying to do like some form of civilized society, but he takes a position, the assassin won't talk. I spared your life. You don't need your head anymore. And we have a knife to the throat. That's full on torture. That means all the elements of torture.
It's just bad cop, bad cop. There's nothing else. I don't even think that if they had 8D8 up there that he would be a good cop. It'd just be all bad cops up there. But yeah, so the thing with torture, people like to think that legally or otherwise in practice that it actually has to be some sort of violence or harm has to be inflicted. But the threat of harm is enough, right? That mental anguish that is instilled in terms of making someone believe that they are at great risk of bodily injury or death, something like that. That's enough. That's why waterboarding is torture, right? You're not technically hurting somebody like physically by waterboarding them. At least not if not if it's done in a manner where you're not just like drowning them, but you're causing severe mental anguish. I mean, it's triggering this response in your body that makes you believe you're drowning, right? And this is holding a knife to somebody's throat, or a vibro blade, whatever that was that the Tusk or the Gamorrean had. No different, right? It seems to give a kill order, and a reasonable person would believe that you're about to be beheaded, right? And it's no different when you get dropped into the Rancor pit. The Rancor before the cart before the Rancor here in this case. But yeah, that's enough, right? The threat.
Agreed. Followed by then, well, we see what happens with the Rancor, and we have Fennec, who's probably being the best version of Fennec that we've seen. The cattiness, you're paying for the name, they're not that good. I don't know how much of that was improv or just Ming-Na Wen just chewing up the scenery, having the time of her life, because it was fun.
She's just disgusted with this whole thing. It's like
you're overrated.
You paid what for a Taco Bell taco? Oh, you're totally paying for the name there.
She's awesome. Dropped in, and we find out that there's no Rancor because the Rancor's been dead for at least 5 years.
How about though, if you notice, look closely, go back and watch that scene. The button for the trapdoor is inside a Rancor mouth. So
Yeah.
it's just right. You know what's coming if you're paying attention as somebody on that trapdoor.
It's like, oh, maybe I will stand over this way, or
Yeah.
and the guard backed up. He clearly knew the other
Yeah,
guard who turned into a snack. So
that's right. Yeah.
no.
Well, here I would point out the same thing. In the scene, just the immediate scene that we were just talking about with the sword to the neck, they might have known fully that they're not going to chop his head off, right? But there's no difference. That's still torture. Here, even though they know that there's no rancor, you're still inducing that terror. You've dropped him down into the pit. There's only one thing that the pit is used for, and you've called out the creature that you're notionally about to sick on this poor man, and that's enough to instill the terror in him. Although I think what ended up shaking out in the episode shows that he may have just been, pulling a Princess Leia and coughing up like, oh, they're on Dantooine, in terms of the answer that he gave back. But still, he's in clear fear. I don't know at that point if the Rancor had been in there, like, what are they going to do? Like, call it, like, whistle at him, like, no, sit, like, don't, because he coughs up the answer, but the door's open at that point. I'm not sure how that would have worked.
Can of change, a water bottle, like how do you call off the rancor? Yeah, there's
Sorry, it's too late.
and again,
Thank you for the information, though.
Yeah, Bib didn't replace the rancor, so yeah.
Cheapskate.
Again, maybe the rancor was a meal, but yeah, there's a lot of bad with that. And it also highlights the theory that torture doesn't work, because if he did do the Princess Leia and just said whatever he wanted to say in order to get the torture to stop, like that, there's an argument there that, despite the movies of we'll break an arm in order to get the bad guy to talk, that doesn't always work. And
No.
we'll say anything to make it stop. That said, they go to see the mayor, which has echoes of David Spade on Saturday Night Live playing the receptionist, not letting people in. It is so glorious with the name. And this is regarding.
I don't see you on the list here. What's funny is there's, before my work with the Red Cross, I did a bunch of work with municipal governments. And if you've gone to a zoning board or something like these really high octane, just thrilling local legal proceedings or quasi legal proceedings, you'll know that there's a massive amount of red tape for an applicant just to get on the board. So say you want to put a fence in that's above whatever the limit is in the zoning ordinance, just to get on the docket to go in front of the board and make your case. That in and of itself is an experience just like Boba walking in there. Like, you can't just show up and be like, yeah, I want to build a fence. Let me see. They'll tell you to come back. And, after forms are filled out in triplicate and 4 months has passed. So that had me really reliving a lot of my experiences. But it's funny. He walks in, he's like, I've captured one of his pets. And the guy, this bureaucrat, is just like, yeah, but your name isn't on the list. So
It's just the bureaucracy at its finest.
yeah. And Mos Espa of all places. We're not on Coruscant or, one of these massive core worlds where you would expect this sort of thing. It's like, nope. Mok Shaiz has that layer readily baked in.
In addition to that, we have middle management jump in, realizing everyone here can die if this doesn't change right now.
Apologies.
Sorry. Still can't see him. He's busy, but at least he's trying to make sure we all don't need to get shot today. Because you could see there are other people there. It does look like a city government with people at little desks filling out forms, getting birth certificates or whatever. So it does It is very well done. We then get into the mayor's office, and there's a summary execution because the Night Wind's not supposed to operate outside of Hutt space.
Which is
That
unusual because I think prior to Jabba's death, Tatooine would have been, my galactic geography may be off here, but I think Tatooine was part of Hutt space. I mean, you had in the Clone Wars movie, sort of famously, Obi-Wan's coming out and trying to negotiate a treaty so that the clone forces can use Hutt space to include passage through Tatooine. But clearly that has changed, or the sands have shifted a little bit. But yeah, he meets kind of a quick end there.
yeah, yeah, there's no due process. Like there's no proceeding that we have that's just instant death. And if that does happen, everything gets really ugly fast because there are protests, because that's not the way it's supposed to be. You just
Right.
don't. Even spies get a military tribunal, type situation. There isn't instant death for, sorry, you're not supposed to be here. Bang.
Yeah, well, it was like a strict liability execution, right? You are a member of this faction, this group. You were doing your work in this outside of this defined area. Death. There's no other questions asked.
It's like killing invasive species and holding tanks
Yeah.
of ships. It's like, no, we can't have that in the bay. We kill it, as opposed to, but again, like we don't kill everyone on the ship then on top of that. So it's we don't want ballast tanks being emptied with critters that, start upsetting the natural habitat. But that's
What
this is one
what
too.
what I'm sorry to interrupt, but what I was curious about here is who's setting these rules. Is it the government of Mos Espa that has determined this? Like it's a really delicate balance between the authority of the Mos Espa government, because there's no Tatooine government, right? Tatooine is not like Alderaan with a capital city and elected or ruling officials. This is a local government. Clearly, Mok Shaiz realizes that he serves at the pleasure of whoever the ruling crime lord is, the daimyo. So it's not as if they have this authority that extends very broadly, or it's got real limits to it, right? If the daimyo, for example, doesn't want to follow your rules, he's not going to follow your rules. So it's interesting that they have this one sort of extreme rule regarding this guild of assassins, and they're clearly projecting strength here, as Fennec would like to say, in having to lay down an extreme version of the law to keep these assassins reined in, because I don't think it would be enough to like issue them like a citation to come to Mos Espa, magisterial court or something like that. So I wonder, I'm very curious to see where the balance shifts, if we're going to see more of where that government functions in relation to the crime syndicate.
There's two parts for that. One is afterwards, where there's the comment about we need permission to kill them, and that in due time. But the other factor here that's just weird is what's the deterrent effect that the assassins get killed, the people who sent them don't know why. If you knew that, our guys were summarily killed by local law enforcement because we had the audacity to send them there, that at least sends a warning to not send anyone. But it could be mission failure, which is potentially we'll send more to finish the job. So there's that factor. I've listened to multiple podcasts about this episode. There's debate about, does the mayor, was he participating in a cover-up? Was he telling the truth? And I don't know the answer. I don't want to speculate, but it just seems odd. And I'm not surprised if it's a double cross, and I'm not surprised if the mayor is telling the truth. I honestly don't know which way this is going to shake out.
Yeah. Well, the mayor, I think, if nothing else, is interested in his own self-preservation, and in this current moment with what we know, if that means aligning with the Hutt twins, as we'll talk about momentarily, and working a deal here, then that's his estimation, right? If he views that as the way, like, this Boba Fett character is just a temporary occupant of the throne. I'll play ball with you, Hutts, and we'll clear the way for you to take power. I think that's probably where we sit right now. But it's interesting because he makes the comment. His one bit of advice is, running a family is more complicated than bounty hunting, and there's some pretty heavy connotations there with the Hutts and sort of the interconnected criminal web that Jabba left behind.
I found it very entertaining that the politician does speak out of both sides of his mouth.
That's a very good point.
I'm like, well, that's okay. That's a new one. We're going to go with it. I don't know if they recognize that, but here we are. Which then brings us to, we go back to the sanctuary. And I honestly believe all of those scenes were filmed in one day. Like, okay, now we'll do this. So we got everyone in costume, everyone's here, and we go. Switch out maybe some extras so it doesn't look like it's the same background people all the time. But that's just my sense of filmmaking, that you did it.
Right.
You're gonna shoot all the scenes now and go. And maybe Jennifer Beals changes dresses. I'm not.
That's right. Yeah.
And
quick wardrobe switch.
Yeah, it'd be weird if she stayed in the same thing. It makes sense for Boba and Fennec, but anyway. Oh, you don't know. And we go outside. We have twin Hutts who look super heavy. There has to be some OSHA issues with carrying people.
On Tatooine, no less. Just are they getting? I assume I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they're giving those litter carriers their 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch somewhere in there.
Okay, so we have the male one who's using a small furry creature as a sponge to mop up sweat off of him. And you can see the thing like squirming and, clearly having a bad day because you're the sponge. And his sister with the fan both seem to have tattoos under the mouth. Mm-hmm. So again, they're different looking Hutts. But at the same time, they do look like they're right out of 1983. And that's pretty glorious.
Yeah.
And they actually have a deed or a will or some instrumentality saying that they're the owners of this, which is one of the few times that we actually see a paper trail of some kind in Star Wars.
Very true. Yeah, the that lead attendant opens up that sort of digital document. It looked very much like in The Mandalorian season 2 when Boba Fett pulled up some of his own genetic information on his wrist, and it kind of holographs up in a way and projects up into the air. So that was kind of cool. Hard to say. I mean, we won't go deep diving into estate practice, so I don't know. We've yet to know the nature of their claim, if it's some sort of estate flow where they're laying claim to his property because they're the next living kin. Interestingly, if you're talking pure estate practice, Jabba either died with or without a will. If he died without a will, then default laws, galactic laws of Tatooine, since that's where he died, would kick into place, and that would provide sort of a default flow for Jabba's estate, his possessions, whatever he left behind. I don't know that you can deed over a criminal empire. I don't think that's probably contravening public policy. It would be the formal term there, but in any event, typically with laws of intestacy, So laws for dying without a will. You're going to see the law look to surviving family members, and cousins can and often do inherit if the line traces out and there isn't a surviving spouse. I don't know where Rada is. Jabba does have a son. Who knows where the heck he is? That would be kind of wild to see him come all the way back from the Clone Wars TV series. But yeah, the law will look to family members, and they'll even go into shares and whatnot. Now, if they have a will, everything goes according to the will. And I would like to think that somebody as savvy as Jabba the Hutt probably had a pretty complex estate plan in place. And so that would be the governing document or digital hologram.
A couple things on that with intestate succession. If he died, in fact, without a will, all of this should have been done 5 years ago after Return of the Jedi. So they seem
a little late.
They seem rather late. So why was Bib Fortuna on the throne? Are we dealing with some contingency that it couldn't be a life estate type situation because Jabba would be dead? So was it the life of Bib and then would flow to the cousins? That at least could be a will that could make sense. But intestate generally would flow down to the children. So in this case, his child, and then it would go up to the parents, and then it goes out to the sides to aunts, and then cousin or uncles and cousins and whatnot. However the line then goes, but it gets super complicated, and there are complex flow charts to look at for what happens if you don't have a will. So have a will. Save your family members a whole lot of stress.
Whether you're running a crime empire or just a normal small business.
Oh God, it's so hellish when you deal with family members who don't have a will when they die. I've dealt with that multiple times. It sucks. It's stressful. It's not fun. Yeah. So have a will.
And in universe, you've got to think that there is a lot of people don't have a will because of this presumption that, hey, my family members know what I want and they won't fight. They all love each other and blah, blah, blah. And usually I should say that probably holds true. I don't want to like cast aspersions on people, but oftentimes it goes sideways for a variety of reasons. Now, if you're a Hutt, if you're Jabba the Hutt, you know how the Hutt family operates. You know how backstabbing the Hutt cartel is. His own uncle in Rada the Hutt tried to kill him or get him killed through this complicated web in the Clone Wars series. And so you know that there is zero chance that if you die without a will, that things are going to go according to your plan, and people aren't just going to rip apart everything that you've created. So yet another reason where whether Rada is alive at this point or not, he certainly had a plan in place that clearly something's happened to that, and it's not being executed. So I don't know where his estate lawyer is, somewhere, on Now Hutta, but not doing his job. I don't know what's happening here.
That and the fact that Boba mentions the debauchery of Nahal, it's like, what's happening there? Maybe we don't want to know. Maybe it's really wrong because those are siblings snuggled up together, and that's disturbing on all kinds of levels.
That's another podcast.
Yeah, in happy place. But that said, a missile strike from the backpack would have taken care of this problem in the street, would have sent a really big message with chunks of Hutt flying everywhere.
Gosh.
And sure, there'd be collateral damage of the litter carriers, but problem would be solved.
I think they would have appreciated it. They would have thanked Boba for that release from their employment.
As soon as you hear the launch, they drop and run. But yeah, that's a horrible job. We then have issues with that, with the comment about who would they get permission from to kill them? Hutt's crime syndicate? I've heard one person theorize Kira. That would be cool. It would be very cool if we get Kira in and age her up, 15 years or so?
Well, Amelia Clark, no matter how old she is going to look the exact same. She will never age, much like Hayden Christensen or Paul Rudd. So we can just be honest with ourselves there. Yeah, it's an interesting one. This doesn't so much have to do with, any real world legal issue, because getting permission to kill somebody, I suppose, is something unique, maybe to it, like a military operation or something like that. But
No.
um, in universe, really, Kira would make sense only if there is still an overall Shadow Collective type syndicate ruling over all of the crime family. So the only time that we've seen the Hutts subservient, and I would hesitate to even call it subservient, but basically aligned and maybe subordinate to anybody else, was when Maul was running the Shadow Collective. And naturally, I don't think that the Shadow Collective was in place in Solo when we see Kira, but she's savvy enough to run an operation like that. Certainly I could envision her as the big boss at this point in galactic history. The thing that came to my mind outside of her is just the Hutt Council. So the Hutt Council, I mean, they Hutts die all the time, and there's infighting and stuff like that. You could see the Hutt Council, which we've seen before in canon on screen in the Clone Wars, getting involved and having to bless off on something like this. They would only really do that if it benefited the families, and there's some angle there. So that remains to be seen.
Let's talk about the scariest Wookiee we have seen on screen. He's been in the comics. I think Kenobi scarred his face in a lightsaber fight? So, and I was looking for that. I was like, you don't really see it,
Yeah.
but it would have been like 25 years has passed, if not more, since that fight. But
Grew the hair out over it.
yeah, maybe he was in a bacta tank for a while, but
Sure.
he did have the scar of the comics for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about him. Who is he? And you made some notes as well.
Yeah, so Black Chrysanthemum, what I love about this is you don't have to, if you read none of the comics, if you know none of his backstory, you get it. This is an evil looking, badass looking Wookiee, and the message is sent. And then Boba has his few sort of snide comments toward him. So you get that there's a history there. That's enough, right? There's no bar to entry with this character. If you have read any of the material, and I would absolutely commend, his first appearance was in the Darth Vader series, so the first 25 issue run, which was 2015, which can be, they've bound the stories together in like a single graphic novel. Highly recommended. But suffice it to say, long story short, he is an elite, just absolutely ruthless bounty hunter. Somebody that has a code like Boba Fett in some regard. This ain't him, right? Black Chrysanthemum is brutal, has metal injected into his knuckles to make him a better fighter, to make him a better gladiator at one point in his prior life. But just a stone cold killer, high priced, one of the most elite bounty hunters out there. So when he steps on screen, you know that a hefty fee is being paid for him to be there, but also he's one of the most capable folks out there. I mean, I don't care how much plot armor you have. Somebody like this is going to give you a run for your money. So a lot of backstory, but he's capable of dealing damage. But I like that he's probably an independent contractor here, one in a long line of bounty hunters being brought in to serve as personal security, which seems to be the job he's filling here.
It also highlights that our understanding of a bounty hunter does not match the Star Wars definition of a bounty hunter, because it includes hired guns, which in our reality, they don't do that. They're bail bondsmen. They don't go around doing hits. That's what hitmen do, and that's illegal. So, no. That said, the way Boba gave him a cold stare, and just the glare that Wookiee has is terrifying. I still think Boba would take him. Like, as long as he doesn't Boba has to strike first
Yeah.
and has to kill.
Use your missile carefully.
Yeah, don't miss. That said, fly, shoot, don't miss. If the Wookiee gets his hands on you, you die.
Yeah.
But again, my money's still on Boba, which is a weird reaction to a character that terrifying.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because this isn't the first time. It's very commonplace for there are like any number of independent uh, companies out there that provide security services. Whether it's celebrities or whoever, um, for a variety of purposes. So, but in the Star Wars universe, it's actually pretty commonplace to see bounty hunters filling that exact role. Famously, again going back to the Clone Wars series, you see it repeatedly. You see it in Rebels as well a little bit. But bounty hunters are often called upon, whether by virtue of their I don't know if they're a cheaper option than a professional security firm, but they typically come like well trained, heavily armed, and probably for a reasonable price. You can get a good amount of protection. I guarantee you Black Chrysanthemum was not reasonably priced, but how can you put a price on protection by a badass Wookiee? I mean, that's you name the number Wookiee and you'll get it. So
Absolutely. Which then leads us to the flashback, and which is actually the Ace storyline, which is a head turn I did not expect.
mhm,
I preferred having it divided up compared to the first
like
episode that
bouncing
breaks
back and
out.
forth.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
really didn't sit well with me. Well, this version did.
Mhm, mhm.
And part of me would rather just like get the past over with so we can get to the present. But I know they're going to be intertwined because there has to be this is my thought, there has to be the motivation for killing Bib Fortuna in order to take the throne.
Right.
That if Boba was content and happy with being in his Tuscan family, his tribe, he never would
Yeah.
have gone looking for the body armor. He never would have gone on that adventure and then killed Bib. I have a gut feeling we're going to see something very bad happen to the Tuscan tribe, and it's going to be Bib Fortuna's fault, and that's why Boba does what he does. So
It's a
that's
dark
my
it's a dark prediction. It Boba's an interesting character too because people are making a lot out of the amount of time spent on flashbacks. But he's not like Han Solo or Chewbacca or something like that. These characters with well-defined and fleshed out backstories. The only stories that we've got from Boba, other than his like 5 or 6 minutes on screen in the original trilogy, is just him up to being 13 years old or so, 13, 14 years old. And that's it. We get a little bit in the comics in terms of jobs that he's on and things like that. But they're sort of building his backstory from whole cloth and having to find motivations, find what makes him tick, what his code is, if he has one, all these sort of basic building blocks for characters they're having to find now in this series while balancing it. So I agree with you. I when you bring somebody like Two Fets and Black Chrysanthemum on screen, I want to see how that plays out. But I do think they've built this to a point with the Tuscans where it sort of sets stuff up on a T. And what we're about to talk about here was a really compelling run of events.
I also think it's some of the best Star Wars filmmaking ever done in this
Yeah,
episode because
absolutely.
it's pure Western. It's and I think it was Danzy on Coffee with Kenobi that mentioned this. This is more Western than Mandalorian, which was more samurai story.
Hmm.
And I agree with that comparison because this does have the Lost Cowboy vibe to it. He gets taken in
Sure.
by locals or Native Americans,
Hmm.
and joins the tribe, literally, and finds new purpose in life. That's extremely different than anything we've ever seen before in the Star Wars story. So I'm just the scope of the storytelling they did was really well done. And we see in this the Tuscans are basically like trolling sand, because there are creatures that live under the Dune Sea, literally, that it's like fishing. They want to catch them for food, or in this case, dog food. But then there's a train attack, and which parallels ugly parts of U.S. history where we had, westward expansion, and it wasn't just like shoot the buffalo, but it was shoot the Native American. And also killing the buffalo was to wipe out the Native Americans. And there's that theme to this train that doesn't have train tracks, so that makes it super convenient. And they're drug running, and they are literally just shoot to kill Tusken Raiders.
I would give both sides credit for incredible accuracy, despite the speed. The Pikes are very good on the blaster, and the Tuscans are very good as well, at range, no less. So they're both evenly matched there. But I'll jump to a point a little bit later in the episode. You see the Pike leader say, "Hey, we were defending the train from what we thought were marauders." And you don't hear the Tuscans' response to that because you don't have to. But sort of a very different point of view, right? There's no indication that this tribe in particular was attacking this train. And so if you just a basic premise of self-defense, you can't instigate conflict, you can't instigate the fight and then say, well, deadly force is totally authorized here. That's just a basic core building block of that particular legal defense. That defense is not available to you if you have instigated the fight. And it would be one thing if the Tuscans were armed with the speeders and had these capabilities to actually attack this train effectively when Boba met them. But they have banthas. They're just sort of stock standard Tuscan Raiders. They've got no capability to take on a train unless it's stopped or incapacitated in some way, like moving slowly. I don't know what the top speed of a bantha is, but it ain't comparable to that train. So what you have here is exactly what you mentioned, Josh, this sort of ugly callback where they're just pot-shotting for fun. And for no other real reason other than just being dastardly villains aboard this train. And that sort of fits with the Pikes as a species. They're not real savory characters. I particularly, I told you I had some comments about the banthas. I did not like them shooting the banthas. I didn't like the Tuscans could have just park the banthas a little bit further back, put them behind a dune. I don't know. The first time the bantha went down, I felt bad. The second time the bantha went down, I felt really upset. And especially because we don't know a lot about Tusken Raider culture or anything like that, but we do know that banthas are sacred to them. They're sacred animals. These Tusken Raiders form a bond, a very deep bond, a spiritual bond with their mount. So it's not just a beast of burden to them. There's a real connection there. And so I felt that as sad as it was seeing those things go down, I knew that it meant something. And you can rewatch this episode with that in mind. And I think it hits a little harder, but I was happy to see that train get taken down.
Yeah, they're like big golden retrievers. And when you look at the face of a bantha, the big mouth, the teeth. We've seen the Tuscans brush the teeth with a big toothbrush. They're neat creatures that are gentle. It's like you don't see a bantha stampede.
Right.
It's just like they're not a fast moving animal. And I too was a little shocked with, you recognize they're big targets. You tell them to lay down, somebody hide them,
Yeah.
but no, they're just target practice. And then they turn into a defensible position by hiding behind the carcass. It's just, it's really upsetting.
At
Which,
least they served some purpose before they just sank into the sand. But yeah, was there not another dune to park them behind or something? And could the Pikes have not just, spare, I don't know.
yeah,
Shoot the Tuscans, let the Banthas escape. I don't know.
it's the Bantha's defenseless. It's wrong. But during that initial fight, when the shooting starts, Boba grabs the kids and gets them behind a bantha for cover. That's great. That is great to
Yeah.
see. But that raises the great question about, did Boba have a duty to do that? He's more than a prisoner at this point.
Mhm.
He's not fully like on the team, but did he have a duty to save those kids? Your thoughts?
So no, I don't think he strictly had a legal duty. He's not in any position where he's acting as a parent or stepping into a parent's shoes. He hasn't been like entrusted. It's not as if the Tuscan chief said, "Okay, you're just our prisoner, so you're going to be like babysitter, right? You're in charge of these kids. This is a lowly duty. So go train the younglings or whatever." None of that has happened. They just happen to be in the line of fire. Um, I think it's quick thinking, it's smart thinking, and it speaks to his character. But if he didn't do it, there's not a legal duty that's been breached there. He also didn't put them in the danger. It's not as if Boba brought that train upon them. He just reacted quickly. So no, I don't think he had a legal duty.
I agree with all of that. It's also what makes him likable because he
Yeah.
didn't leave the kids to die. He didn't take cover himself. He saved the kids and then waited and then helped with the burial detail. Which brings us to the Tuscans' right to self-defense against the Pikes. And I think the tribe is kind of a quasi-nation state.
Mm-hmm.
We don't fully understand all the different Tuscan tribes and how they relate to each other, but they're definitely at least a municipality. But they might
Yeah.
be viewed as a nation state that has a right to self-defense, with this train going through trying to kill them at will. Boba executing his plan to defend them has a couple parts that go from, I'm going to go to Tashi Station to take out a biker gang in order to steal their bikes in order to take out the train. There is so much deep cut love in this. But let's did you realize that was Tashi Station the first time that you watched this?
No, it took me a second watch through, and actually, usually I watch with subtitles on to catch little details and stuff. I didn't do that the first time through this, so I missed when it said. I figured it was probably Cammy and Fixer, that they look identical, but in the subtitles it says Cammy in there, so it was that light bulb that clicked on. But I did not. It didn't also click that was Tashi Station as well, so I didn't see any power converters, which is a bummer.
No,
But
I saw the rightfully deleted scene because
yeah,
Star Wars was saved in the editing by Marshall Lucas, so honor her because that would have added nothing to the original movie. It would have
yes,
made it suck. But it's a deep cut. The video games still look the same, the layout's the same. And when we have these bikers, they're stealing people's food, they're starting to rough up Fixer. Boba comes in very Old West style, and there's a great defense of others argument. Now you could say, well, is he the aggressor? The bikers already started roughing up Fixer and Cammy first. They
yeah.
were already beating people up when Boba got there. So Boba's use of force was justified. Where things go sideways is he didn't kill all of them. He probably killed a couple, but I don't think he killed all of them. They're rendered unconscious. What do the locals do next?
Yeah, what's that bar owner do at that point?
Yeah, it's like, hopefully they didn't just murder them, because that would send a message of this is what we do to bikers here. But
Yeah.
that'd be super dark. And,
Well, they're stuck there now. They've got nowhere, you know, normally you might think, well, they're angry, they'll get on their bikes and ride. No, they're gonna have to take their anger out locally. But yeah, so it is interesting. He does use uh you know, I'm trying to think if he does kill at least one of the bikers, if memory serves. But there's the difference between just a traditional use of force and use of deadly force. And so when you're using force in defense of others, you're effectively stepping into their shoes. So you're using whatever force that they could have used to defend themselves. And this gets into somebody's perception of the threat at the time. So that gets to be messy pretty quickly. Like, what was going on in your head? What did you perceive? But he reasonably could have perceived that they were in danger of serious bodily harm or death, and then by extension, use that same force to defend them. So I actually think he used a fair bit of restraint. I was kind of expecting him to see him like pull out one of the bikers' blasters and just sort of brutally finish the job. But he didn't do that. He also didn't even like tie him up, which was I thought maybe a little short-sighted. I don't know. I don't know how far Cammy and Fixer live from Anchorhead, but or Tashi Station, but they might want to move or go incognito. I'm not sure.
yeah, what do they do with the bikers at that point? Because do they kill them? That would be an option to go like, well, we got the chance.
Yeah.
That's wrong. Is there some law enforcement that they can call? Like, what do they do with them? They could tie them up at that point, but then what? You now have prisoners, and you might not be set up.
Yeah. Got to call Cobb Vanth out to clean the mess up, since I assume he's still in action at this point in the story.
Yeah, he would be. That said, we now have Boba taking their bikes. Now, that's clearly theft. There isn't a good argument here for him operating with color of law of some kind. That
No.
he full on just robs them.
Yeah, this is a forfeiture of your assets.
It's so hard to go like, what's the legal justification here? Because it is so law of the gun.
Let me just say, I was very bummed. You're going to steal and commit, in this case, probably grand larceny, because it's dollar amount wise or credit amount wise, probably well over the threshold to trip it into the more serious crime. But he didn't take the extra step that I wanted him to, which was steal one of the biker jackets. Like, how awesome would it have been for Boba to come riding back on these stolen speeders with us? In my memory, I don't know of another instance where we've seen Star Wars biker jackets in play, but that would have been amazing. And he could have turned down that black garb at the end. Like, no, I'm going to stick with this jacket. I'm cool.
What he should have asked for was, does anyone have a hat? I don't want skin cancer.
Yeah.
Help me survive. So next issue with that is we now have the train fight, which I initially thought of it. Oh, excuse me. We have driver's ed. Do you want to take the driver's ed issue?
I just love that he sets up an unlicensed driver's ed school in the desert for these Tuscan Raiders. Generally speaking, driver's ed is done by licensed professionals that are authorized by the state to execute these, to teach young drivers how to do it. There's a reason behind that. We don't want Uncle Jesse teaching you how to drive and like that being your gateway to a license to operate a vehicle on the streets of your town. But yeah, I just find it amazing. And you're seeing exactly why that professional requirement, that licensure requirement exists in the real world. Because Boba doesn't have a clue what he's doing. He doesn't speak Tuscan. He kind of barely can communicate with hand gestures and whatnot. And he's not even sure. He doesn't have a curriculum, doesn't have any kind of like effective state approved way to teach operation of these very dangerous, very fast vehicles. And he's lucky that none of them got seriously hurt or killed. But this was like one of my favorite parts of the whole episode. This more than made up for the Bantha slaughter earlier.
Yeah, that this is one of the few times we see a training montage that actually shows like true improvement.
Yes.
We're going to start slow and you're going to jump and we're going 5 miles an hour. Okay, we're now going to go faster. Okay, good. And like they work up to it, which is like none of them were just born good at this. And
Yeah.
that was really refreshing to see.
Yeah, you don't see Luke on Dagobah like dropping Yoda out of the backpack or like missing a branch and falling down into the swamp. But no, I appreciated that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Luke did fail in the cave, but
Well, that's true. That's true. I would have loved to see Puppet Yoda just go flying. Like, whoops. In this case, there is a try, and that's called try again. Don't drop me this time.
agreed. Which then brings us to the actual like fight of the train, and I think this is legitimate self-defense for their land, their nation state, because they're
Right.
tired of getting shot at. And how cool is it to actually have a Tuscan versus Pike fight?
Yeah. Well, and you don't realize it's Pikes until they hit the train and actually get on it, which is pretty cool. The Pikes are like the most inconsistently visually represented species in Star Wars, but that's another conversation for another podcast. But yeah, I think it's foreseeable. As soon as the train comes into view, the Pikes start firing. So it's not as if, I mean, there's a little bit of a gray area that they're setting up an ambush and are sort of seeking out and picking this fight. Um, but I think they're preparing to defend themselves. They don't have to lay back and get hit and take casualties in this case in order to protect themselves from a foreseeable threat. So I really love this part. I love that it was multi-pronged. They had folks in different spaces able to attack the train. And here again, we talked about in terms of the bikers, use of deadly force. Those Pikes are not shooting to stun. Those weapons are not on low power mode. They're shooting to kill. And so the Tuscans are empowered to do the same. By extension, Boba is as well, to defend themselves and defend their tribe mates there. Again, wish they would have parked the Bantha, elsewhere, but that's a critique for another day. But in any event, yeah, it's they really clear out this entire train very, very quickly and very effectively. And probably the star of the show on this train is that crazy conductor droid. Like, it's like General Grievous Jr. is what I thought of him as. He's just going bananas up there. His programming is clearly locked in. I mean, there's no like, my purpose is to survive and stuff. He's like, no, my purpose is to kill everyone and blow up this whole freaking train. And so he like overcharges the engine there and kills everybody. Let's see here. The actual, what's interesting on the back end is that the Tuscans don't seem interested at all in the spice. They don't care. They're dumping it out. There's no real theft of property, but there is an exchange that goes on there in terms of sort of laying a territorial claim to this indigenous population.
I'm gonna one point, train engineer, conductor checks tickets. This guy drove the
Oh,
train.
okay, fair enough. All right, touche.
The engineer goes on a suicide run. So from a common carrier perspective, you're not supposed to do that. From a crime lord perspective, I guess that makes sense. That said, they're running drugs, and that's a no-no. So if you're going to argue law enforcement from a territorial perspective of saying like, you don't run drugs through our territory, I think they got a good claim there.
Right.
The fact that they go, we're not going to just summarily execute you. You're going to walk out of here and you all get a little water jug and leave now and you don't die. So, okay. And
Yeah.
the fact Boba negotiates a treaty.
Yeah. One and the important thing to realize, like in the U.S. at least, Native Americans, we you hear the term reservations. That's sovereign territory. You enter a reservation, that's not U.S. territory. That is territory of the tribe, and they have their own laws. They have their own law enforcement. Obviously, there's some synergy there with the U.S. government, and there's a role the United States plays in terms of relations with the tribes and whatnot. But that's their territory, right? You're not in, say, Texas when you enter reservation territory in Texas. Uh, the same could be said here. This tribe, to some extent, maybe nomadic, but they seem to operate or be, at least camped in this general area. Certainly, the Tuscans that we know from the original and the prequel trilogy, they're territorial in terms of the Junland Wastes, the areas in which they operate. So you can probably carve out a space through which they could define, somebody like Boba Fett could define and say, this area that you're regularly trafficking spice through, that's Tuscan territory. That's not changing. So you're going to have to pay a tax, a tribute, whatever you want to call it, to pass through here. I thought it was really a phenomenal concept here. And I really enjoyed seeing sort of the discourse in terms of indigenous rights and whatnot that kind of unfolded after this episode, and sort of the power that scene held for a lot of folks out there in the community.
Very well done. And to the next scene where there's consent was a giant issue. And clearly these folks watched Wrath of Khan and felt like, okay, that ear creature really freaked people out. How do we one up it?
Take the Geico gecko and make him real weird.
Go right for the nose. And you really should get consent for something for an assault with a lizard in your brain.
Yeah.
That's, oh boy. So that was intense. The reaction of like, oh, I think I swallowed him, because he's freaking out because there's a lizard inside him. And the fact where you have somebody go on a vision quest, they're high, and you just let them go into the desert, that easily could turn into murder in the second, like just a negligent homicide of, yeah, we got him high and then we just cut him loose.
Yeah.
That's no.
The lizard took him in the wrong direction.
It's like we counted on him to listen to the lizard that's somewhere in the frontal lobe of his brain, taking him on a spiritual journey. Wow. Like, did not see any of that coming. The scene with the tree, meaning that their trees do grow someplace on Tatooine.
At some point they did, yeah.
Yeah. So, oh boy, when did the Dune Sea dry up? How many centuries has that been? So and what happened? Like literally what?
Yeah, it was weird Star Wars, but it was awesome Star Wars. And what I particularly liked was it was the classic case of getting a peek into something that felt big, felt like there's a larger story behind this, but we don't know it and we're not going to give it to you right now. So it's sort of like original audiences in A New Hope hearing Spice Mines at Kessel, right? Lucas ain't going to explain that. You get what you get, and just it's world building at its finest. I love the idea of, I don't know if we'll explore it more, but there's definitely a mining history that's happened on Tatooine, whether that's pre or post sand, I don't know, but perhaps it was some sort of environmental apocalypse type deal that happened as a result of activities on the planet, but don't know. We may or may not get any more of that, but the idea that the Tuscans existed there before the sand and have now endured and adapted in all the years since is really amazing. That's good Star Wars there.
That, and when he comes back, we get a Tuscan wood shop. And that's
straight
right.
out of a Macquarie painting.
God bless them. That is such love of the material. But it reminded me of my grandfather's workshop and seeing like the awls and the other woodworking tools and going like, okay, I've actually kind of seen that. We never made anything like that, but
your grandfather's not making ancestral gaffy sticks.
no, but as children, very young children, he did make us wooden swords and shields, which freaked my mother out. But my brother and I had amazing hand-eye coordination because no one wants to get hit with the word sword. So
yeah, right. You learn to defend yourself real quick.
He did us a favor, and we learned a lot. But that's the closest we got. That's the blunt instruments for small children. Anyway, it was great, and the entire dressing scene and seeing kind of the hooka dance. I hope I'm saying that correctly. That it's very New Zealand.
Yeah.
Exceptional. So this was absolutely not what I expected, and I loved it.
Yeah, I think that the tweet that that really capped it or encompassed it for me was the Book of Boba Fett in 2 episodes has taught us that Jawas are the true menace on Tatooine, not Tuskin Raiders, as was previously thought.
Yeah, big time.
Any Star, this is what really caps it for me. Any Star Wars that adds to the story and causes me to go back and watch Star Wars that I've seen hundreds of times at this point throughout my life in a different light, that's good Star Wars. I will go back and watch A New Hope, Attack of the Clones through a very, very different lens now. And that's just what's really, really good about this interconnected storytelling, this web that they're building with canon, because it continually keeps us going back to whether it's the original trilogy or any other material, and providing fresh detail to it. And I think that's, if they keep that sort of pace, I mean, I'm already happy with the series, but it'll really carve out something genuinely special in a way that Mandalorian has, but in a different light because it's focused on a lot of newer stuff. This is really tapping into some long time like old OG Star Wars characters and things like that, and expanding it in really positive ways. So more of that, please.
I'm very happy with how this is going. I give this episode an A, just because it earned it. Now, where we go from here, we'll find out, and how they balance the A and B story, which I think might alternate. I really wouldn't be surprised if everyone has a flashback in present day, and the one that's the main story will be the longer one. So, lots of good stuff. So, this was fun, and we'll be back next Sunday. So, everyone, thank you for tuning in. If you listen to us on one of our podcast channels, please leave a review. Remember, we also have a Patreon that has some additional content. And everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay geeky.